Hi, I'm Magda from the Wnętrza Zewnętrza channel. Over a year ago, Kiri came over for tea and we talked about her building a small house that can be transported. This time, we'll be the ones visiting her for tea and we'll ask how she likes living there. Kiri already lives in her own little house, so my first question for you is, how do you like living in such a small space?
Surprisingly well. It's actually a very interesting discovery because it's an experiment. I already said this in the previous video and I thought it would be very claustrophobic, but it's not. It turned out that all these solutions, or at least the vast majority, work, like a foldable desk, a pull-out sofa, or a closet system in the shower, and it really makes living here much easier. And it's not tiring.
Well, I also don't feel like the space here is cramped. Yes. I think it might also have to do with the height, how much space there is upwards.
The whole house is 3 meters and 16 centimeters tall, minus the insulation, so it's actually quite high here, quite high. And there's also this interesting magic that happens here, and everyone who comes in says that the more furniture, the more items we put in here, the more spacious it feels. I don't know what that's about, but it's such a magical house where it actually looked much smaller when there weren't these things here. Also, the white walls definitely changed the situation, but these solutions are really clever and really well thought out, and that's why everything somehow starts to come together and make sense the more things we have here.
And maybe it's also a matter of the colors of the individual things, because actually you don't have any dark colors here.
Yeah, I think that also makes a difference. First of all, this little house really opened up and brightened after we painted all the walls. That became even clearer when we added the light white ash flooring, but honestly, there's some kind of magic in these pieces of furniture.
Okay, and what about the windows? Because nowadays people often go for large glass panels, but in your case it's completely different. You have a few windows, but they're rather small.
Yes. That was actually a real mystery what would come out of it, because at first I was afraid it wouldn't be enough. And we actually decided that if there wasn't enough light, we agreed to add another skylight, which is a rather controversial agreement. Because we would have to, I don't know, make some big rearrangements here and right after construction, so I guess that's how it was.
Why didn't you think about a skylight from the start?
Because it's expensive. Because it's just expensive. And this project isn't about using marble in a tiny space. That would be pretty absurd. Of course, you could approach it that way, but this is more clever. It's a project that's actually useful, where everything is solid, nice, and well designed. But it also doesn't drive costs up to absurd levels that are out of proportion to this space and this idea.
Mm-hmm. So how do you spend your time here? Is it the kind of house where you just live intensely and only come here to sleep? Or are you actually able to work here, cook a proper dinner, invite friends over? So, what's the most guests you've ever had here at one time?
The most guests I had was 5 people, then 6 and 7 just showed up, and there was dancing, yes, it's possible, dancing and partying, and that's another surprise. I'm really not just saying this for the sake of the film, but I thought it would be exactly like you said, just as I expected. Because I'm an active person. I run, I work out, I see people, I do all sorts of things. And I usually treated my home or my apartment, since I've never lived in a house or a cottage, just as a place to sleep. And that's it here, it's exactly the opposite. I really like spending time here. I read, I cook, I invite people over. And seriously, it makes sense, and there's room for everything, somehow.
And what accounts for the fact that more time has passed since our last meeting on the Wnętrza Zewnętrza channel than you initially estimated?
I need to take some photos. Listen, renovations and construction are probably something where you need to add at least 80% more time to your estimate, or even double it. I honestly have no idea. I don't really remember what happened. I guess I've kind of blocked it out, but it just took way more time than we expected. Especially with a project like this, where everything is very experimental and we did everything completely on our own, from scratch. Including the cabinet fronts where I stood and ironed the edges. You just can't predict that. These aren't standard procedures where you order furniture from IKEA, assemble it, and it takes a set amount of time. But everything is, as I said, very unpredictable and experimental, so we underestimated the time. And since there were also a few problems related to plumbing and a few other issues like that which we couldn't easily solve, all of that dragged things out.
And can you tell us a bit more about those solutions, the unusual ones or the ones that took more time? You said, for example, that the kitchen had to be custom made, so you made the cabinets yourselves. And for obvious reasons, that takes more time than just ordering ready-made furniture and assembling it. And what else here required more of your involvement?
Honestly, everything. I even have trouble listing those things because really every piece of furniture here, except for the chairs that we bought from IKEA, is furniture that we designed and made ourselves. And each of them was, in a way, a problem and a challenge. Maybe not a problem, but definitely a challenge. Something that seemed finished was never really finished. A simple example, the desk. We made a desk that folds and unfolds. It felt like it was already finished, that we had it. But for example, the support struts I ordered unfortunately weren't suitable for that weight, so we had to order more support struts, which for instance weren't available at the warehouse. So we had to wait a week or two for ones that would be able to hold that weight, because that panel was also made by us. On the outside we have plywood, no, we have a carpenter board with an oak veneer, and inside, well, I don't remember exactly what, but we made kind of a sandwich, so it's a specific construction. So it was hard to calculate the exact weight of that panel. So it was kind of like, it's not that it's very heavy, yes, but it's already a certain surface, so we had to do it by trial and error. We would attach the gas struts, oh shoot, they're too small, and then order more. Okay?
So you made the tabletop out of several different boards, yes?
It's like a sandwich.
Okay, and why?
And here we come to the construction, because this desk locks against a board, a kind of strip, let's say, that's by the wall, because it's a mechanism where part of it goes underneath. So to make this construction lighter, but at the same time quite stable, so that the idea with the blocking could work, we had to come up with our own special combination.
It needed a certain thickness, but couldn't be too heavy.
Exactly.
Sure.
Damn. Exactly.
So, what about the two things that seem to me to be the biggest challenges in your tiny house? First, the bed, which is above us and can be lowered to the height of the shelves you see here. And second, the shower, which is in the same place as the closet. Because, for example, with the bed, I remember that at the beginning of the construction you told me how it was supposed to look. And yet it was a bit different from the solution that was ultimately made here. So how did the process of creating it develop?
When it comes to the mezzanine, there are actually a billion ideas for how it can be lifted. There are 1,000 systems, including electronic ones, let's say, on some rails, but we decided, let's just make it mechanical. Not in that American way where you just press a button, but this house has its own character. There are lots of interesting creative ideas here, and we just did it with a crank. And there was also the idea of whether to lift it from underneath the mezzanine or attach the mezzanine at the top so it could be pulled up from above. Yes, from above, from the upper point. In the end, we decided to go with the second option. It's stronger, it's more stable. At first we tried a solution from underneath, but that was a complete flop. Something just didn't work out with our tinkering. We even bought some marine rigging systems. I don't know if it's worth talking about, but it was all about pulling a rope. It was a complete disaster. It's a shame we didn't record it. I think it could be done. We would just need to tinker with it a bit more. In the end, it's more stable when there's a point at the top and the ropes are lowered from that upper point.
Yes. Okay. And when you talk about it, it suggests that you tried other solutions. Yes. How would you estimate how much time it took before you came up with this solution?
Yes. A year, but... No, literally, it took a year, but it could have been done much faster, probably in a week or two if we had been focused only on that. But considering that we were also doing other things in the meantime, I mean, I suggested, okay, let's leave this mezzanine for now. Let's focus on something that's more obvious. Like the furniture fronts, which took a long time to make. Well, yes, you could also say that it was a tedious process. But there's no mystery here.
It's not rocket science.
It's not complicated. You just have to measure and do the job over and over again.
There's a lot of talk about how different drawer slides and Blum hinges work well, but Blum isn't the only manufacturer. And you have a few such also unusual solutions, so I'm wondering how you searched for individual elements. Did you go for a popular, proven brand, or did you have to look more for, I don't know, sizes or some technical parameters? And where did you even look for such information? I think that could be very useful for people who would like to create some extra storage or something more interesting at home than what they currently have.
Well, that's a great question, because that's part of the reason why the process took so long and why it stretched out over time. Like I said, nothing here is standard. And for example, I don't know, a typical board, let's say a kitchen cabinet front, I don't remember exactly, maybe 2 cm, 18 mm, something like that. And for that we have standard hinges. Our kitchen cabinet fronts are made from blockboard, so they're simply thinner. It's harder to find hinges like that. I'm not saying they don't exist, because they do, but it's not exactly super standard, so we had to get a bit creative. When it comes to all this, let's call it creative problem solving. We have a lot of experience with non-standard solutions, since we're designers. That's why we have all sorts of contacts and we know who to turn to. And I think that me from 7 years ago absolutely wouldn't have known how to handle this. And it's kind of true that you have to immerse yourself in this world, the design world, and still each individual project is a new challenge. So, for example, like with the actuators, you had to research the topic from scratch, call wholesalers and stores, get familiar with it, choose the right weight, select the load, so it was, so to speak, something new. A new detective case, figuring out how to deal with these actuators in this particular situation. Of course, this is a small thing because it's a ready-made component that you can buy after all, so it's really just about good research. But let's say this applies to anything you do on your own.
Yes, and honestly, I feel like a lot of things we do ourselves at home seem in a way like trivial things. For example, I don't know, painting the walls. We take some paint, a roller, and we paint. And then it turns out that we spend the whole day taping the baseboards and moving furniture before we even get to painting. And then there's the primer and some holes to fix. And it ends up being a whole weekend of work instead of just a few hours you thought it would take. And that's what you should expect if you don't have any experience with it. A desk is also an example of a very simple project like that. At first glance, it's basically a top and a strut that you match to the weight of the top. You screw it in and it should work. Right.
But for example, in the case of the desk, it took us quite a while to figure out how the desk should be wedged. Because the issue was that we wanted it to be at a 90-degree angle parallel to the wall and lowered parallel to the floor. It seems simple, but yes, now should we maybe put a leg there? There has to be some support, right? It can't just hang in the air on the struts alone. Or maybe some kind of sliding system? Well, we didn't know. There were a lot of options at first, and at some point while we were at the hardware store, we thought, it could just be wedged like this, right? Here, a surface could stick out and it could wedge itself under something that's attached to the wall, to the structure. These actuators will just be additional support. It could close with magnets, right? This project came to life over time after many conversations. Sometimes the simplest solutions don't get accepted right away, even though they're clever, brilliant, and clean in terms of design. Sometimes it takes a lot of discussions to get back to that starting point. So I think the desk was one of those things. And once we knew, we had to figure out how to actually build it. I mean, should it be a board? Should it be underneath? How to wedge it? I mean, should we put some kind of frame there? Or maybe just, I don't know, plywood? Or will the plywood hold up? Simply, if you want to make something yourself, you have to try cutting, screwing, painting, repainting. If it doesn't work, fixing it. That's exactly how this house was made. Yes.
I have to admit, your design experience is very visible in the house because the individual solutions not only work, but are also creative. It's more of an engineering sense, I would say, and a design sense, because everything is also aesthetically pleasing.
Thank you very much.
And for example, a table like this has 2 legs, and they could just be ordinary columns, but instead they taper towards the bottom. I think this is plywood. It has a rounded edge. It looks really nice.
Thank you. All of this was actually well thought out. I mean, our main goal was to make things functional, aesthetic, and with a certain design idea, let's say, but for everything to be practical and not pretentious. Let's say that's the kind of brief we made for ourselves, so that it would be a smart solution with a little twist, with some detail, made from simple, attractive materials, inexpensive, like I said. Well, we're not going to line a tiny house with marble, because that would be absurd, or make golden muntins. Besides the fact that it's very unaesthetic, it just doesn't fit. It's not...
Yeah, it was meant to be a small house close to nature.
Yes, close to nature, easy on the wallet, so we have... And when it comes to the table legs, Dorotka actually helped me with the proportions there, and that was great, because different people dropped by and helped throughout this process. Whether it was with the construction or with tasks like protecting the boards by oiling them, or even with some more design-oriented work. Dorota, a designer, worked on the design. She visited and we said it was time to tackle the legs. We had to get on with it. So it was great that it was also more of a social event. It's not like those people...
So it's really the result of the work of many people, even though the core group was more limited. Yes.
Yes, that's true. I mean, we've been building this house for a long time, and there were times when someone would come for a few days and help out. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we've been building it for 2.5 years, so maybe that's also something to lift your spirits. But we're saying...
You say we're building, that's in the continuous tense. Does that mean you still see it as if you're still building?
No, 98%, 98%. There are still a few little makeshift things that bother me aesthetically, and I'd like to finish them, so there are still a few micro details left.
All right.
There's no sink.
I hope you'll be able to finish by summer.
I hope I'll be able to finish by winter. No, I'm just kidding, but...
No.
Until the next winter, and now I'll be
Recalculating?
Re-estimating the timeline?
All right, because it would be nice to record a home tour here so that we can actually show everyone how it looks. Because we're talking about some solutions. Some of it could probably be shown already, but I'd like to do it properly and show everything, so I can't wait. When you finally put the finishing touches on it and can say it's done, invite me over.
I can't wait either, but guys, give me a break. I know this whole thing has a life of its own. That's exactly how it feels to me. To lift your spirits, because everyone I talk to who's renovating or building a house, it never goes according to plan. It always gets delayed because unexpected things pop up, things we never see coming.
Although I feel like a lot depends on what you're doing, right? Finishing a newly built apartment with an experienced designer who works with their own team, there's a good chance that they'll actually finish everything on time and there won't be any major surprises. But renovating an apartment in a historic apartment building or building something from scratch, especially from a unique design and not one that's been done before, well, that's a different story, of course.
That's something completely different, yes, because we didn't have any crew and we also had full-time jobs. That's a big difference. So let's say we can think, okay, this weekend we'll be building and pushing some things forward. When it turns out, for example,
it's raining.
It's raining, or some job comes in, so well, that's just how it is, you have to do it. Or we're already very tired and want to go to the movies, that can happen too.
Well, yes, that's life.
Life still happens, so everything gets delayed, or then, for example, the struts we mentioned don't work. Personally, I installed those actuators 3 times. 3 times I couldn't measure that load correctly.
Right, we talked about struts and hinges, but please tell me about the other materials you used, because I noticed there's a lot of wood here, not particle board, a lot of plywood and block board. Could you tell me why you chose those particular materials and what their characteristics are? Because I've noticed that a lot of people still don't see much of a difference, for example, between plywood and MDF. They hear plywood and say, oh, that's that junk that's worse than wood. But actually plywood is more durable than a regular board, and it's also more expensive. So when you say it's a budget house, I don't really agree with that, and I'd love to hear more. Let's take advantage of your knowledge and experience, and I think that was probably discussed in design school as well.
Well, material science is a vast field of knowledge, and I absolutely don't feel like I can be an expert on this topic. So my experience is still quite limited compared to what it could be. For example, when it comes to poplar plywood, we want the mezzanine structure to be as light as possible. So we decided to use aluminum profiles. We made the structure out of aluminum profiles and put plywood on top. We used poplar plywood because it's very light and we could oil it to protect the top from any spills or damage. It was a practical choice, plus it's beautiful, has a light color and is above us. Just take my word for it. So it's a very pleasant material, and not only does it meet the technical requirements like being lightweight for our needs, but it's also really, really lovely.
But when you say lightweight, do you mean it's lighter than other plywood, or was it actually the lightest of all possible materials that could have been used in this spot?
It's lighter than other plywood. I don't know if there would be any better materials, but when it comes to a compromise between price, weight, and aesthetics, this poplar plywood was just the perfect middle ground for us. Very often it's just exactly that kind of ongoing search. For example, the floor, we have a beautiful floor, white ash, it's gorgeous. I haven't seen a more beautiful floor. And these are boards that are adapted for underfloor heating as well.
So it's engineered wood flooring.
Engineered wood flooring, 7.5 mm. We were constantly looking for the thinnest possible board. Because it's a small house, we want to save space. Aesthetic, strong, but at the same time suitable for underfloor heating. And we chose this kind of board, okay?
But is it 7 mm for the whole board, or 7 mm of the top wood layer?
7.5 mm for the whole board.
Do you know the wood layer's thickness? No.
I think it's 23 mm, I don't know, I'm not asking right now.
Because when it comes to sanding, I mean, many manufacturers no longer recommend sanding engineered boards, but people still do it. And some engineered boards have this top layer, either thicker or thinner, and the thicker it is, the more you can do with it. And I know that because your renovation took longer and you did a lot of finishing work inside when the floor was already in, some tools might have fallen and some scratches could have appeared. Yes.
It happened.
Exactly, so I was wondering how possible it is to sand the floor to even out things like that, but with such a thin layer it probably wouldn't be that simple.
I don't know that. It's definitely in the specifications and the manufacturer can definitely advise. It would be hard to know everything. But that's exactly the magic of these kinds of projects, that you're constantly learning all the time. As you go, you have to read the specifications. Many times I sat and read the specs for the water heater because we had to check something, we weren't sure, something wasn't working. Gosh, maybe we even said it the other way around. Well, no. But that's kind of the whole magic of it.
On one hand, I feel like when you live here, it's easier to finish something because you're already on site. But on the other hand, you no longer have that motivation to move in. So you can put it off forever. After all, you can live without a sink in the bathroom.
Well, unfortunately, I think the second scenario is happening now. My enthusiasm for building has decreased a bit now that I'm already here. It's difficult at this point, if only because I have my things here and everything is beautifully cleaned up. And now where to ruin it with that construction vibe, well, it kind of breaks my heart a little.
But are there a lot of things like that left?
There are a few things left.
Okay.
Not all of them are, I don't think anything will make a lot of dust or a big mess, but right now I just really needed to comfort myself by being here and actually living here. These were really, really busy years. Very, very busy. We actually spent every free moment or most of our free time at the construction site, and it was really intense. And what's worse, I have more ideas ahead of me, so now I need to gather my strength.
But I get that they're no longer focused on this house.
Not about this house.
Okay, and I have another question about the location of this house, because it was built somewhere else, then it was transported here, where we are now, and the interior was done here. So the question is, what's next, because it was designed to be transportable, so I assume it wasn't meant to stay in one place for its whole life.
No, absolutely not. As I said, I think I mentioned it in the previous video. It's only partly mobile. It's not as simple as just hitching it up and moving it. You have to organize it. Transport like that on a low bed trailer with a loading crane. That's what will happen, and he'll be transported to the final site, it seems, which is simply my plot.
Do you think this will really be the final plot, or just last a few years?
It could also be just for a few years. That's why I made a dramatic pause here. It could be just for a few years. We'll see. Maybe it'll be the final one.
All right, well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Not so much for it being final, because I can imagine that maybe someday you'll want a bigger place, and then there's always that possibility. I wish you a plot by a lake or by the sea in the mountains with a beautiful view, and then this little house could accompany you on your trips, and I think that would be fantastic too, but...
Exactly, no limitations. That's what's great about this project. I don't have that feeling of being tied down to one place, and that's wonderful.
Don't you feel attached to this house? I can't imagine you selling it.
I absolutely won't sell this little house. I would have to be in a really desperate situation in life. I can't imagine that. Actually, it's more like my guarantee of some kind of stability. Stability and instability, or maybe a kind of mobile stability. That's actually a really nice combination, but it suits me. For me, it's okay. For my personality, for my current needs in life, for my need for adventure. It's a great solution. So being stable-ish, let's say. Always with options for change, as you said.
That's brilliant. I think this little house suits you perfectly. And I'm glad we could talk today and that you shared a bit more with us and you could already see some of the solutions. And I hope that maybe we could meet here again later this year. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, Kiri. I'll keep pushing you, and I'm saying this publicly so that later... Oh my God.
This will be on the internet.
But I just can't wait. I've known ever since Kiri told me about this little house. And it wasn't there yet. Not even the steel structure was done back then. And I already knew there would be cool solutions for the next year. And I just can't wait for this video.
Now it's just a matter of getting moving.
And by the way, Kiri, I saw that you're reading Cabin Porn.
I'm reading Cabin Porn.
How do you like it? It's a book you can buy in the store, interiors, exteriors. It's standing under the camera. I just wanted to show it.
But it's our tripod. I'm really pleasantly surprised. It's great. There's a somewhat similar story there. Similar but different. I started yesterday, but what I saw is...
Yesterday? But there's a bookmark almost halfway through. Well...
I read fast. There are also a lot of illustrations, but it's a very pleasant surprise. I thought the book... I didn't expect it to be so nice, just looking at the title. I thought it might be more of a collection of online inspiration. But the story that's included there, especially at the beginning, and the whole idea of this project, this Cabin Porn, is captivating for me. It's really my vibe. And it's interesting, especially for people like me who are looking for cabin and design inspiration, who love nature and even just enjoy looking at beautiful cabins in beautiful places. It's really nice.
Yes, well, the book has a few interesting stories presented, I don't know quite in detail, different stages and where the idea came from. But as for the title, here's an interesting fact. I checked the website statistics to see what keywords people use to find interiors and exteriors. And there were also keywords related to porn. And I was like, what's going on? Why? But it quickly became clear that this book is actually positioned under those kinds of keywords. Well, the title Cabin Porn is quite telling. I don't think anyone looking for that kind of content would decide to buy this book. But who knows? Interiors can always inspire you.
This is a porn for cabin lovers?
That's quite a bold statement. All right, thank you for staying until the end. I'm waiting for your likes and comments. Cheers for Kiri so we can meet here again soon for more recordings. This time we'll be presenting not just individual solutions, but actually the entire interior. Honestly, I can't wait ever since Kiri told me about her vision for the house. And that was, I don't know, about 45 years ago. Much longer than the actual construction takes, really, because this idea was taking shape. And yet, from that first spark to realization, a lot of time always passes. I really have always believed strongly, and I still do. And now I can see that it actually looks fantastic. And I can't wait to be able to present it to others as well. Thank you so much. Many thanks. Take care. Bye.